Hello friends. Today we are going to discuss about Agile and Scrum. Today we are discussing about the foundation of it. Okay, let's move to the next. So the first question arises in our mind is what is Agile? So Agile is a software development approach based on the iterative progression. The progress that like it will be divide a big task into a small segments, and we are focusing on that piece of segment, or in agile terminology we are calling it incremental. So it's focusing on early feedback. Early feedback means if we're following the other previous approaches, we are getting the feedback about feasibility of that software and feasibility of that feature at the end of the product. At that time it's becoming very difficult for make any changes or adapt new changes. So agile is not working in that way. Agile will provide the early feedback so that customer or the client will aware about like the product they are developing is feasible in the market, and it will be accept the adaptability. It will also focus on the adaptability. Let's suppose we have some issue with the feedback. We are getting a feedback from the client or from the audience, like there should be some changes need to be adopted. So agile is that much of flexible, it can adapt those changes and continue the development. And it majorly focusing on incremental delivery. Incremental delivery means whenever there's something will whenever a small component have been developed, it will be delivered to the client, so that the client will also be engaged in the agile framework. It encourages the collaboration between the cross functioning team and the stakeholder. So basically, Agile will encourage everyone to be collaborative and cross-functioning team to be a part of the Agile. Means like the stakeholder and other cross-functioning team like DevOps, we have development team, and we have testing team. All are collaborative together to to work to achieve the incremental delivery. Let's focus on the Agile manifesto. Agile have some core values. These are the four core values on which Agile worked. So the first value is individual interaction over the process and tool. Agile is majorly focusing on the peoples and the interaction between them. It will be less focused on the processes and the tool, because the solution have been provided by the people, not by the tool. Whenever we are getting some blocker and some issue and some complexity, we required a discussion, and this discussion have been done with the people. So agile is majorly focusing on individual and interaction. And the next thing is working software over comprehensive document. In the previous model, like in the case of waterfall model, we are more focusing on the documentation. We are preparing the documentation at the beginning of software dev and in the beginning of life cycle. And once the documentation have been done, then the implementation part will become. But in the agile manifesto, they are majorly focusing on the working of the software. Like they will less focusing on the documentation. They will give a small requirement, and we have to follow that requirement, and we have to provide some delivery on the required uh, requirement. So the next is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So basically agile focusing on like it is a case in which customer will come up with some changes, And in the previous model, we are not negotiating these changes because we have completed our documentation, everything, and at the end we are providing the software, and any in between changes are not acceptable. So this is the case of waterfall model. But in the case of agile, we are more focusing on a customer collaboration, and we can also negotiate the contract between the client and the business analyst. And then the core part is responding to the change over the flowing a plan. So basically whatever the change we are getting from the client, we are accepting those changes and we are making a plan accordingly. That is the core values of manifest that we always have to remember while developing using the agile. Next, let's make a differentiate between agile and waterfall. A waterfall follow a sequential process while agile is iterative. In the like I'm giving an example of waterfall. In waterfall, first we are doing the requirement, and then we are doing the development, and then we are doing the testing, and then we deliver the product. Let's suppose in first we are doing the documentation, then we doing the implementation, then testing, and then deployment. Let's suppose at the time of implementation, if you're getting some changes, then it will be becoming very difficult because if some changes have been come, then we have again move to the documentation, and then we have to do all the documentation, then we will do the implementation, testing, and deployment. So making change in between is very difficult. Let's suppose at the time of deployment you find some issues or find some problem. So if you want to make some changes in that scenario, you have to again come to the documentation part, then implementation, testing, and deployment. So this is a very difficult. This is an example of waterfall. This is an example of waterfall model. So, but in the case of agile, we have we have divided a big problem into a small segment, and we are providing delivery of that small segment in a continuous way. Like we have divided in a small problem, we are calling this problem as an like incremental. So we will find out like what are the dependency in all this issue at the early stage, and providing the delivery one by one. When all the delivery will be done, we are getting the end product afterward, which also containing the changes that have been required by the client. So agile follow the requirement changes anytime. That is the same similar thing I have already told you. Whatever the changes that have been, let's suppose I have providing this in first increment, and I'm getting some feedback from the client. So in the next sprint, I will be also including those changes and making my next delivery accordingly. And agile deliver work software in increments. That is a similar thing that already give you an example. It will be providing the software in the form of increment, and waterfall at the end. Waterfall will providing the software at the end of the software, like deployment time at this time. And so but in the if we are providing all those incremental, we are getting the final incremental. So the next question is, what is Scrum? Scrum is an agile framework for iterative and incremental development. So basically agile, first of all we have to make an cleared about like what is agile and Scrum. Agile is a methodology, and Scrum is a framework. Scrum is an agile framework. Okay, Scrum is an agile framework, means like Scrum is following the agile. So that's why it is a agile framework for iterative and incremental development. So it is in part of it's come under the umbrella of Agile. Scrum is come in the umbrella of Agile, and it is doing the similar thing that is the heart of Agile, that is iterative and incremental development. Uses a time box iteration called sprint. So basically, Scrum. What Scrum was doing, Scrum is providing a time box for iterative called sprint. So basically, we have a sprint. We have a sprint. We have a sprint, on we are providing a time time for that time for completion of that sprint. And usually the time period of this sprint is around 1 to 4 week. And it also encourages the continuous feedback and adoption. That is the same thing with the Agile. So next, let's discuss about the Scrum roles. So in Scrum we have a product owner, which define the backlog, which will be take the requirement from the which will be take all the requirement and make the backlog and priority accordingly. And then we have a scrum master, which facilitate the scrum process. So basically it will be helping the product owner, and it will be helping the developer. it will be providing it will providing the facility to the developer. So then we have a development team, which will be actually working on the product increment. And then next move to the Scrum event. So inside the Scrum, we have a different events which will be we will flow, which will be follow in the in the sprint completion. The first event is sprint planning. Sprint planning is we are doing the let me also graphically show you. We have a sprint planning in which we are doing the planning of the sprint. Okay, we will be taking the backlog from the product backlog and adding that some backlog in the current sprint. So we are deciding like how much story point is required for the completion of that task. So I will give you an example of it. Let's suppose I have a product backlog, and in product backlog I have 30 backlogs. Okay, and the total story point for this 30 backlog is, let's suppose, 30 uh, uh, 83, you can say 83 story point. So in one sprint we are looking for, we will take the 20 story point. Okay, we will taking the 20 story point. So accordingly we will take the backlog accordingly. Okay, so that it will be using the 30 story points. And then we have a daily scrum. Daily scrum is an event that will be happening daily, when and in the and it is must be a 15-minute stand up to track the progress. Okay, it will be tracking the progress, like whatever the thing we are doing, and is it on the track or not, so that at the end we are able to deliver the increment. And then we have a sprint execution. Sprint execution, we have a daily scrum. We have daily scrum, and then we have a sprint execution. Basically sprint execution is a time frame that we will be take to completion of all the tasks that we have covered in the one sprint. That is a time interval. Sprint review is happening once the sprint execution have been done. Once the sprint execution have been done, then we do the review of that sprint, in which we are inviting all the stakeholder of the program, and we are showcasing them whatever the development we have done in that sprint. And we can also showcase some demo and some recording, so that stakeholder will be aware about the completion of the sprint. And that is sprint review. And in the end we have sprint retrofit. Okay, then at the end we have a sprint retrofit, in which we will identify and identify the issue that we have encountered while doing that sprint. And we will be trying to figure out the loopholes or problem that we are facing in the sprint, and we will be adhering those changes. And in the next sprint we will be try to minimize those changes. Okay, so that the next sprint will be a much smoother than the previous one. And again we have this cycle. Okay, this is an iterative, that's why it is called an iterative. It is an iterative process. Okay, and we have a multiple sprint, and in each sprint we are at the end of the sprint we are providing some incremental. Okay, I hope everything is clear right now. So let's move to the next, and the next thing is sprint planning. So let's focus on, let's deep dive into the sprint planning. So in the sprint planning, the team select the item from the product backlog. We have a lot of product backlogs. Let's suppose we have a product backlog of 30, and let's suppose I have pick 5. Okay, I have pick 5 backlog, and in that this 5 backlog I will be providing, I will be planning and distributed it amongst all the development team. Let's suppose I have a 3 peoples, developer. So I will be dividing that 5 product backlog with 3 developer. And while making the product backlog, we also define for each product backlog, we are providing the DOD, definition of done, that we are doing. Okay, we are providing definition of done, in which we are defining like what are the things, what are the checkpoint that's need to be fulfilled, so that we will come to know like this thing have been completed. Okay, and next thing is sprint, defining the sprint goal and expected outcome. Okay, in the sprint planning we are providing the sprint goal. What is the goal of, like in the case we have to complete this 5 backlog, so this is the goal of our sprint. And what is the expected output? Expected output is the incremental. And let's suppose after completion of that thing, we have delivered one function feature, and that feature is our expected outcome. Okay, and ensure a clear task definition and acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria, we also call this a DOD, definition of done. Daily Scrum. In Daily Scrum, it is a 15 minutes of quick status meeting that will be happening daily basis. And in this meeting, we have the developer have to focus on the developer have to answer 3 questions: what he did yesterday, what he will be doing today, and what is there any blocker that is there. Okay, it help in identifying the issue earlier. So whenever developer is telling we are facing some blocker, so we will early identify it and try to fix it. That, and if the daily scrum team is exceeding the 15 minutes, then scrum master have to come in between and telling to telling making a small meeting and allocating a small and interrupt the developer to uh, to do it in next to remember it in the next daily meeting. Sprint execution. So the development team work on the sprint backlog. So basically, the development team will work on the sprint backlog in this sprint execution. Sprint execution is nothing but the duration in which we are completing all our tasks, and testing and integration happening continuously. So whatever the things we have done, we also have to verify it or test it, so at that specific time, okay, in the sprint execution time, and regular update sharing in the DS daily scrum. Okay. Sprint review. In sprint review, we will demonstrate the complete work to the stakeholder. Whatever we have completed in that sprint, we have to showcase it to our all the stakeholder and gather the feedback and update the product backlog, and so that we can adjust the product priority based on the feedback we are getting it from the stakeholder. Sprint retrospective. In sprint retrospective, we are discussing what went well and what to improve. What are the area that require to have an improvement, and what are the things that we have done very good in a good way, so that we will continue the good thing, and we are trying to improving the area which is lag behind, and it will be help in identifying the action point for process enhancement, and help the team continuously improving the performance of end product. That is our incremental. And then next is our scrum artifact. Basically, scrum artifact is a three scrum artifact. The first one is product backlog. Is it contain a list of all the requirement that we are getting from the stakeholder, and we have a sprint backlog. It is a task that have been selected for the sprint and which have been taken from the product backlog. And the last thing is incremental, that is a working software at the end of the sprint that we are delivering to the stakeholder. And the next thing is backlog refinement. So backlog refinement is required because it is regularly updating the it's contain regularly updation of the product backlog break, so that we will identify we will identify the risk in the sprint. So basically what we are doing in the backlog refinement, we will taking us let's suppose we have a large story, so we'll divide it into a small task and removing the unnecessary and outdated backlog items in the backlog refinement. And then we have a story point estimation. So we have a story point estimation which we are using for measuring the effort that have been required for completion of specific backlog, or you can say story. So we are considering one story as a one day, and it is being like Fibonacci. We are following the Fibonacci for it, like 1, 3, 5, 8, and etc. Considered complexity, risk, and effort required. So basically, on the basis of, let's suppose if there is a something that have been very complex and difficult, so for that thing we will be increasing our story point, and it's help teams to planning the real static workload. So story point we are referring it, so that we will identify we will identify like how many days or how many time it will be take for completion of one task. It's just an estimation, and it will be grown when we are when we are doing a multiple iterations. Planning poker. So it is a collaborative estimation technique, and the team member chosen the story point based on effort. So basically what we are doing, we have a task, we have adding some story point for that, and we are asking all the team members to vote for it, like saying like the story point that have been assigned to that specific task is it fair or not. It's encourage the discussion and improving the estimation accuracy, so that all team member are aware about it, and whatever the collaborative answer, we will be making that accordingly. Tracking progress with the burn down chart. So we are using a burn down chart, and basically burn down chart is a chart that we are using for tracking the development of sprint. And I will be giving an example of it. Uh, let's suppose let's suppose in the sprint I have 30 story points. This is a story points, and this is a time: day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, day 8, day 9, day 10. Okay, we have a 2 week sprint. Okay, so what we are doing, we are from there we will creating an ideal line. Okay, we are creating in one ideal line. So let's suppose in day one we have not done anything. Okay, in the day two, let's suppose two stories will be getting closed. Okay, two tasks have been done, so the story point will be decreased accordingly. It sometime it is like we are performing very well, and sometime it will, due to the blocker, it will be getting blocked for so many time interval. So at the end of the day, we are getting one graph. That graph we are calling the burn down graph. So this burn down graph will be used for identifying the risk. It will be used for identifying the risk in the sprint. Okay, that is the one thing we have to remember. Okay, so basically it show the remaining work versus the time sprint. That is the same thing I told you. Story point and the time. It's help if the team is ahead or behind the schedule. The team is ahead if the actual line is below the actual line. In that scenario, it is ahead. In this scenario, it is ahead. It is ahead. And if it is behind the schedule, in that scenario, it will be away from the ideal line. This is an ideal line. This is ideal line. Okay, if it is there, then it is behind schedule. Behind schedule. Okay, so this is a risk factor. Okay, it's enable a risk identification. So it's enable early risk identification. At that point we can in that, if it is a so thing and if it is not being updated here, then the scrum master will be come in between and raise the alarm. Okay, so that is a burn down chart. Next we'll look into the velocity chart. It track how many story point the team completed per sprint. It help in predicting the future sprint capacity and show the better sprint planning. So basically, burn down chart is nothing. Whatever the thing, whatever the outcome we are getting it from the sprint, that is called the velocity chart. Let's suppose in sprint one, okay, in sprint one, I have completed the 38 story point in sprint one, SP1, and in SP2, in SP2 I have done it like 35, then 40, and then 37. Okay, so the average will be around 38 or 37 point something. So this is called the velocity. Okay, this is called the velocity. The average of all these, the average of all the sprints. Okay, this is called the velocity. It will be help in identifying, like let's suppose I'm getting an average of 38, and in the next sprint if I target for 45, then it's becoming a questionable, because we are overcommitting it at that time. So it will be help in identifying it. So the common agile challenges and the solutions. So we have the first challenge that we have mostly encountered in agile is like changing priority. Okay, let's suppose I'm working on something and suddenly in the next sprint they are making a huge change. So at that time we have to cater those things. So for that, what we have to do, we have to use a buffer capacity whenever we are doing some sprint, or whenever we are doing some sprint planning. Okay, we have also include the buffer capacity. Buffer capacity should be included. Okay, this is the first thing that we have to think. A blocker due to dependencies. This is also a very common thing. We are getting a blocker due to some due to the dependencies. So for that, what we have to do, we have to track the dependencies earlier. Okay, this is the solution of it. Okay, uh, and overcommitment, and sometimes we are doing the overcommitment for the task. So for that, we have to use the velocity to plan the real static workload. So let's move on to the next topic, that is our agile best practice. So first thing that we have to do, we have to keep the backlog updated. Okay, that is the first thing we have to do on the daily basis. Okay, we have to, basically whatever the ticket we have picked, we have to update that ticket in the daily basis. Okay, encourage transparency and feedback. Okay, that is the thing we have to do. We have to encourage the transparency, means like we have not doing the something personally, and the end of the day, we and not at the end of the sprint, we are pushing or publishing those changes. Okay, we at the after the scrum meeting, we also have to discuss about like what we have done when whatever the issue we are getting. That's why we have a daily scrum. Okay, we will discussing about our task, what we are doing. Okay, so that there is always be a transparency, and in the daily scrum also, after the daily scrum, we can also give the feedback about it, what we have, we can make the changes. And regularly refining the process for continuous improvement. Okay, for that regularly refining the process for the continuous improvement, like in the daily scrum we are identify like there are some things that is not going well, so we have to interrupt there, and we have to suggest uh, a refined process for it. These are the best practice we should follow. Okay, this is a conclusion. Okay, so mastering agile and scrum improve the efficiency, adaptability and product quality, and continuous learning and adaptation is the key. It is the key of agile. Okay, you always have to remember this thing. Continuous learning and adaptation is the key. Okay, and we have to apply these principle in our daily workflow for better team collaboration and delivery. Okay, I hope everything is clear. Thank you for investing that time. uh yeah, it's okay. Bye.